Hey, Heather. How are
Hello,
you?
I'm doing good.
Good. Let's see. I don't know how I do. Oh, I see. No, that's not right. That's not right either.
Hello,
Hey, Brianna, how are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Great, thank you. I'm just trying to set up a PDF here so you all can see it. Oh, well. Well, I'm in trouble with the school
For real?
because
Really?
because we were supposed to have our reviews on Thursday afternoon,
Who cares?
and and I'm getting yelled at by the principal, and because all of the reviews are supposed to be on Thursday and Friday from 8 until 11 p.m., 8 a.m. to 11 p.m. And there was an email apparently sent out in December that talked about this, and I kind of like spaced that out. Or maybe I didn't. Maybe I just said, screw it. I'm having my reviews with you guys on a Saturday because that's when that's the way it's always been. And that's the way it works for me. And maybe that's a better way to assure that I get a chance to meet you guys, because you can come in on a Friday night if you're from out of town and be there and then get home in time for, whatever, so.
I feel like online studios are just different, though. You can't apply the same rules to.
Well, I mean, and I sort of said that actually. That's interesting you say that. So Scott's saying, and I understand this. I was the one that suggested this years ago, that we have the reviews and the reviews all in one time, and everyone has to show up, and it's saturated and overlapping. I mean, that's all positive stuff. But as I've gotten more and more closely aligned with this online thing, I can't really have like faculty and students walking by talking and pointing and looking at your review when we're supposed to be online. I can't hear what's being said, and it's so I don't know how they do. I actually don't know how they do the online thing down at the DT. I mean, and that's the other thing. All the reviews are happening down there because that's the new cool place. right? So like, how do they do the online reviews there? I'm not sure. So I'm very interested to learn that.
Well, we all like
Anyways,
to pay better, probably.
anyways, Scott's probably not very happy with me right now, but
You can just blame it on all of us.
no, I won't do that. Hi, Adam. How are you tonight?
Hi, pretty good. How are you?
Good, thanks. Hey, Drew. How are you tonight?
Great.
Awesome. I can see your face. You're not in total darkness, Adam. Did you find out about Ryan yet to see if he works there still? Ryan Cousino from your office?
I don't know him.
Okay. So that's your charge. You need to go introduce yourself to him.
Oh, okay.
Okay. I want to get started because we have a lot to share with you tonight. So we have Tim here. Hi, Tim. And
Evening.
let's see. Wow. So Pencils Down is in 2 weeks. 2 weeks from tomorrow night. So just like I pledged, this semester is going quickly, and this is my favorite month because, of course, it's the fourth of the 4 months that I teach in the spring semester, and it means that I'm a month away from not teaching so that I can get a break from all the voices in my head that you guys contribute to, along with the many other voices that I hear in my head. And it also means, of course, that we're through March, which I think weather-wise is one of the sorriest months of the year, despite the wonderful things that have happened to me in the month of March, like my wedding anniversary and my 60th birthday. So despite all of that, I'm still glad that we're past March and in the sort of home stretch. As you know, we have our final review on Saturday the 29th, much to the consternation of the faculty right now, but we'll get through that. And I'm definitely looking forward to that. I also am excited about April because that represents really the final push for me too. Insofar as tonight is the last night that I share new content with you. I have honestly shared more sort of lecture and presentation stuff with you than in any other studio, and I still feel like I have a lot more to give and a lot more to share. So I think this is something I need to continue to work harder on, finding a way to engage you with new content as we move through the semester. And so to get to that, I want to basically show you something I'm actually really excited about, which is the work of my students. So can I get a thumbs up to make sure that you see that? Okay. So the interesting thing about I hope for you tonight's class is that you're going to see the work of my graduate students, basically not even 10 years worth of work. I'm not going to show you every drawing or every plate, but I'm going to show you work that I think you need to see. And I've been thinking a lot about this. You know, I did this talk last year and the year before that, but this year I added a lot more work to it. Or this weekend I added a lot more work to it, and I'm very excited to sort of unpack that for you. Tonight's talk is going to be organized thematically, right, based on these particular groupings. So the student work is going to be, again, from all different years. It will cover two different teaching appointments. One at the University of Detroit Mercy and the other at Lawrence Tech. The ones at Lawrence Tech are both online and on campus. And several of the studios that you'll see the work for, several of the plates that you'll see actually relate to missing middle housing and the work that we've been doing to that subject, with that subject, which is now in my second year, my fourth semester. So thinking and research, case studies, program, conceptual design strategies, drawings, the media that you use to execute drawings or to explore ideas, and then renderings themselves. And I want you to see these things as a way of helping you understand where the university expects you to be, where I expect you to be, where maybe in terms of quality, but more importantly, if you see things that you like, and if you are curious about how they did it, for example, I may be able to answer those questions. Odds are I won't, but I'll try. And we can talk about these things more sort of individually as we go through the next group of sessions, the next group of classes, which there aren't that many. But I'm also just trying to relax you and get you to think about your work in maybe a slightly different way, so that you begin to, again, try to ratchet up the quality of your work so that it is as good as I think it is. So the initial stuff that I want to show you just has to do with the way that students approached their work from just thinking about it. This plate is from an individual that I had in one of my early online studios when it was actually called Thesis Studio, which is maybe kind of an oxymoron. You can't have a thesis and a studio, but that's what Lawrence Tech called it. And so my point is that we were with each other for an entire year. And so this individual presented this in April, and just it was their way of showing the critters exactly what they were about to see and how they looked at their work from the first semester and how that impacted their work for the second semester. Pretty straightforward, not fancy text, not anything but simple text and simple line work with a splash of color. Another student, thinking about their work for the course of the year, began to ask what might be, coined as conceptual questions or philosophical questions, even ontological questions. What am I trying to prove? How does planning alter urban territory? What creates a sense of urgency, for example? I think these are really good questions. And these are questions that you may have been, writing down in your own sketchbook. These are questions that you may have heard me ask. These are questions you may have asked yourselves, or that you may have shared with others, when you're talking about your work with your colleagues, or you may have heard your colleagues say these things. And I really appreciate just the level of sort of possibility, right, that a slide like this has in a final presentation, because it shows that the work is more than just the design. It shows that the work is actually part of a narrative. It's work that has purpose. And so this is trying to align the critters, my word for reviewers or guest critiquers, it aligns the critters right with the level of what they're about to see, the level of thinking that they're about to explore. This is a timeline. A lot of you have been looking at, like Brianna has been looking at Flint, and Flint has a history. It's date. This plate is date specific. It's event specific. It's admittedly a little difficult to read because this is a digital version of what was assuredly a much larger drawing. But in the sort of scope of things, this is this is an important component of anyone's presentation. But it's also just pretty beautiful, right? And I think that the sort of expectation that we have of you and that you should have of yourself is to try to create beautiful artistic plates out of everything that you share with us later this month. So this is just a timeline, but you know, if this had a frame around it, or if it didn't, I'd take it to Michael's and I'd slap a frame on it and hang it in my studio. It's really that lovely. We talked earlier about infographics, and this is kind of a nifty plate that is part site investigation site diagram. Talks about climate, talks about soil, talks about stormwater. But I love this section right here. I don't know if you can see my cursor. You probably can't. But I love the mountain that's shown at the bottom of the drawing, which begins to show stormwater conditions in Haiti. It shows the vegetation that's there. And so it uses a multiple sensibility, a sensibility that the artist, the architect, has many ways to show a lot of information simultaneously. And it's all composed, of course, within an inch of its life. But it's also really casual and colorful and a little cartoony, right? So there's something accessible and simple about it, which I really appreciate. It's just a nifty little figure ground drawing that is, you know, at one moment north arrow, site plan, site section, and a meteorological report about this individual's site. This was a drawing that someone did that diagrammed their entire year's work of work in a thesis seminar, in a thesis studio at UDM, and it's a looping diagram that begins to indicate a half a dozen or so different projects that they produced during the 2 semesters. Most of the work was done in the second semester. And the work is then, this plate is then connected to the physical models that they made and then the photographs of the physical models that they pinned to the wall. The thing about U of D is that for the most part, the work is physical insofar as it's a real thing that they make, which is open to you. And it's physical in the sense that it's, you know, thumbtacked to the wall, and they present it in sort of an analogical sort of format. I have to clear a pop-up here. Yeah, so then there's this plate, which is talking about their design process, particularly in the human urbanism diagram on the left. This is the process that this individual saw the role of the architect. So this individual worked with the community, they engaged the community, they attended city meetings, association meetings, they went to the church, they interviewed, they did a mystery box that people actually found things in and did things with the items that they found in the box, and she recorded the results. And so this is kind of her timeline for her research. But again, it's a beautiful, simple thing that is part of the overall presentation. Some of the individuals have, a real strong graphical sensibility. Obviously, when this plate was done, gosh, I can't even figure out what the year is. This is probably 2012, maybe 2011. This individual, this was before earbuds were even popular. So this individual used the nomenclature of Apple and the earbuds from Apple to create a graphical brand for their work. And this was one of several plates that they developed to sell the jury on why his neighborhood was an appropriate neighborhood for his project for their review, using quotes from individuals that they met, using a nifty little icon that they created, I Care, and then creating the sort of image of the demographic that they were interfacing with while they did this project. And I also like the high contrast and the sort of blurry photoreal quality of this thing. So it's been taken into some sort of Photoshop exercise to make this thing, quite honestly, again, a beautiful poster. This was from my very first Missing Middle studio, The Millennial Trap. You know, you all have talked about this, but I love this drawing. It's really, you know, wonderful in its accuracy, and it's also really distressing. A typical millennial, right, graduates from high school, as 72% of the millennials do, and of those, 68% enroll in college and 58% earn a bachelor's degree, and then they graduate with a large amount of debt. That's like at the 3 o'clock hour. And then in 2014, they reported that the average estimated debt for higher education was $30,000. And then, of course, because that debt is so daunting, they move back in with their parents, much to the frustration of their parents. And then the housing market suffers, of course, because the kids aren't moving out of the house to absorb housing stock because they're living with their parents because they have student loan debt, right? So you can see the vicious cyclical situation. And because people are retiring at an older age, look at yours truly, that creates a shortage of jobs. So I'm stealing your job by teaching you guys right now and teaching the kids at Ferris State, which is what you guys should be doing next year, right? But so this continues to feed on itself, and I just really love the whole. I love the whole sort of speculation about how this could be portrayed in a kind of vintage 1950s graphic, right? That turns the baby boomer, you know, you can have it all, the American dream cartoon into a very disturbing and somewhat sad cartoon for millennials in something called The Millennial Trap. This was actually a brilliant thing, and I'm happy to report I had nothing to do with this. As I would say is the case with most of this stuff. Some of the research actually involved just real simple things like looking at what's there. In this place, doing these sort of simple diagrams of the constituent materials in the North End neighborhood: brick, aluminum, asphalt, wood/asphalt and stucco, and then color coding the colors they discovered in their neighborhood, and then creating maybe new materials that they could work with, concrete, stone, and shingles, and deriving a new, maybe more sensible palette that they could work with. I'll wait till the disruption stops. The figure ground drawing. The figure ground, you know, you've all seen it in the Noli plans, the plans of Rome, which show the void space as white and the black space as the buildings. But the history of a place is often best described either in a timeline or in a figure ground map. But these figure ground maps are color coded to show not only the changes of urban form through and over time, but also their changes of use or occupancy. And it's just a beautiful drawing on top of all of that. This is a drawing of a neighborhood in North End that took the mappings available to you through GIS, usually found in the zoning ordinance of the municipality that you're working in, and they summarized all of the lots and all of the shapes of those lots and indicated them as the yellow line work, highlighting their subject area with the dashed line, calling out the streets, and then identifying who owns those parcels by indicating them with a simple tone. The Michigan Urban Farming Institute, and then the Detroit Land Bank, which owns probably 85% of the properties in the city, and then documenting that with an acreage accounting. So this was just a beautiful drawing in and of itself, just because the colors were so beautiful, but it was also an incredibly informative drawing for the work of that individual. Looking at Brush Park, a beautiful historical neighborhood, taking what's there and indicating it not only as an underlay of the map of Detroit, which you see as this grayed out square underneath the watercolors of violet, canary yellow, right, crimson red, and sky blue, but also an emerald green, but also indicating the sort of major components, where the athletic stadiums are, the properties that are being studied, where the medical center is, and so forth. But just a beautiful drawing, a figure ground drawing, a site plan drawing, but at the same time, again, an infographic. Case studies, you know what a big deal we make out of those. I thought this was really an interesting interpretation. This individual looked at the city that we were studying, North End, but then looked at like a whole bunch of other cities, Volterra, Bath in England, Bruges in Belgium, Midland, Michigan, because that's where they were from, Grand Rapids, where they'd visited, and just looked at urban form from a number of perspectives. This was one of two plates, and then prepared these street elevations off to the right of this drawing, so that the entire sheet was replete with information and with data, and was able to talk about this throughout their entire presentation. Here, the history of skyscraper typology in basically 4 case studies, right? The PSFS building in Philadelphia, the Daily News building in New York, the Lever Brothers or the Lever House building by Skidmore, Owings and Merrill, and Mises Seagram building, all talking about the tower and the podium, and through that case study, creating what he called the Toronto stack, which then begins to operate in all of his work for the remainder of the semester. Case studies is a series of horizontal ribbons. Love the example of Paul Rudolph here, the Lower Manhattan Expressway, the Lomax, or the Continuous City, which is by Super Studio. In even Archigram and Lebbeus Woods up at the top are the case studies that this individual looking at, who was studying, looking at the Ambassador Bridge as a housing development infrastructure to connect Detroit with Windsor, and analyzed those case studies for their basic points in the summary, and then summarize them in very simple terms, like floating cities pay no rent to landlords, for example. A missing middle example showing the work of Elemental in the middle, and off to the left, God, what is that guy's name? I might have to look at it. I can't remember. Aldo Van Eyck, that's right. I can't read it, but my memory did serve me. Aldo Van Eyck on the left, a case study which looked at a home for unwed mothers. So this was 3 case studies all on one plate, and they were able to distill the plan organization of each of the case studies and synthesize them on that plate with their own work off to the right hand side of this plate. 4 simple case studies here. The Office of Jonathan Tate, the Yale Student Housing, just looking at, generally speaking, materials, and then looking at missing middle housing in the last sort of vertical column. Very simple, very elegant, easy to read, clear pictures. Make sure you use high-res pictures for your work. That helps a little bit more. And then sort of organizing it by sourcing all of it, like you see at the very bottom. This individual's work was very, very dense. Their work filled each of the plates. I might have to let them out. Was very dense. All of the imagery filled every sort of aspect of the plate. So hardly any line or any white space was left to their work, because for them, the real estate of the plate that they were showing was so important. So this plate looked at, for example, a neighborhood in our own community in Lafayette Park. Ironically, for this kid from Windsor, they had never been there before, had never even heard of it before, and here they were, a graduate student doing contemporary modern housing. And so naturally, I remedied that pretty quickly by making him go there with me. And then this example of a case study that I didn't know about till I had this individual as a student, a laneway house, an example of an addition to an original house that created, obviously, new program space, indoor and outdoor space, indicating just a couple of views of it, and then a couple of plans, and then an axonometric drawing, and then a simple summary. And their whole presentation had this sort of graphic quality to it in terms of the light text in gray, the dark text in black that was smaller, and then the sort of crimson text as an accent color. Program is the content of your development, the kinds of spaces that you're thinking about. Program is the function, but program also can be represented not just by words and nouns, but by areas, and those areas can be represented as volumes or as shapes that have size, proximity, and relationship. So these are again a blend of infographics talking a little bit about the process of gentrification and how that yields certain and predictable understandings of where one could build in Detroit, and identifying North End as a viable neighborhood for us to study, creating this matrix, creating a map, and talking about gentrification as a theoretical issue. Maybe perhaps a plate you've seen before. The same individual that had the laneway case study looked at the homes of 2016 and the homes of 1900 that were found in her neighborhood, and summarized them as sizes and as colors and as nouns, and then showed them as a blend of both public and private spaces, and then worked from the left and the right to create something that was new and altogether innovative in terms of the sharing of certain kinds of spaces that might be optimal for improving the sort of performance of the design that she was ultimately going to create. She explains it much better than I just did, but it was a very, very innovative drawing. I had never seen anything like that before. Thinking of your work in terms of like a different way of talking about it, like urban joinery. Joinery comes from, you know, the culture, right, of woodworking and craftsmanship and of making, but thinking of joinery as a word that can talk about connecting this with that and how one actually does link something and then thinking about how that might play out in their own work. But let's be very, very clear. It's also just a beautiful plate of artwork that blends both statistics, area maps in the upper left, and then these vivid drawings that are axonometric drawings of the tower and base, and how the tower can be a multiple tower, how the tower can be 3 individual towers, how the base can be a predictable plinth or a modulated plinth, as you see in the lower right in orange. The subject of this studio is a little different than your studio. It was much larger and more expansive in scale, but the graphics still relate to what you're doing. Looking at how the program can be described in numbers that relate to the size of the colorful box on the left, right? So the program is distributed as individual areas, and they broke the program into increments that relate to the overall scheme of the development. And in this case, those areas are then color-coded back to the axonometric drawing, which was, you know, utterly beautiful as well. Thinking about your work as a series of design moves is also really important. Thinking about how you talk about what you intended to do, talking about your work with the purpose that you're bringing to it. This individual who I just ran into the other day, I hadn't seen her in about 2 years, and I told her I was including this plate, talked about her work in Brush Park as a place that had been erased and rewritten, and talked about it a great deal in terms of its stability, its health. She also was very interested in the idea of wounding, healing, and scarring. And so I really appreciated how she classified her site in these anthropocentric terms and organized it in terms of simple things like apartments, commercial buildings, residential buildings, and institutional buildings. I also loved how the site was documented with photographs as a series of equivalent vertical rhythms, or ribbons rather, that were also color-coded back to the site plan as a reference. And she did this for 4 quadrants in her Brush Park site. And so the green, the red, and the blue relate to the content that she talked about in the site plan, which related to a much larger legend in her multi-plate presentation. But the photograph of the building is probably just enough, given her exhaustive documentation of the neighborhood. It was her way of organizing the site in bite-sized pieces. I just saw this individual the other day at an alumni event. I love this drawing. I can't talk about it because I don't know what it means. I just remember, you know, that her site was in Royal Oak, and I remember that these colors related to, if you will, the energy of the site. So she saw color as an emotive thing because she was studying children going through cancer and was creating a facility, right, that would allow the families, much like the Ronald McDonald House, in terms of it being a center for healing. She related the energies of the energies of the program as a site section, and so this drawing is just that. Again, I can't tell you what each of the colors link to as a mood or a spirit or an energy, but really, who cares, right? This was in my first studio at Lawrence Tech, and like with Laura's drawing, Kathleen's drawing here, I can't even talk about it, but the idea of taking a base site plan as a single line drawing like on a brown paper bag, you know, something very simple, and then tying strings to it or creating these pathways through the neighborhood, through the city as a route, and then documenting that with a series of the site plans to show you sort of variety, frequency, and redundancy, right? So the lower left drawing is kind of a summary of all of those drawings. This was a huge drawing, by the way, probably 6 feet by 4 feet when it was all said and done, but I really appreciated the sort of, again, the artistic sort of dimension of this drawing. No less artistic, missing middle housing, looking at North End, looking at a very specific group of 3 lots, one that was too small to build on, one that had 2 front yards, and then doing a diagram of it that showed options like an infrastructure core, adding on with a duplex, and then creating maybe a communal kitchen with a courtyard. Simple line drawings with simple translucent color, transparent color, to show program, to show design intent, and even to show relative sort of proximity and dimension for everything. So Alfred, again, had the sort of program drawing that showed the colorful site in Hong Kong, but thinking of his project in terms of 3 words. 3 is a beautiful thing. Thinking of it as in terms of connectivity, porosity, and permeability. These were terms that he inherited from Stephen Hall in Stephen Hall's book. And he based all of his work with me that semester on his theory, on his writings, and created a project that aspired to those things. And the drawing on the lower left is talking about those aspects. I'm going to text my wife because this is going on long enough. Bear with me. I think I wrote frogs, not dogs. This is the project that I showed you a few minutes ago. In it showed the history of 4 major skyscrapers. The Toronto Stack case study that I showed you. This is the Toronto Stack, and it's showing what he did with that in drawing number 1A. That's the Toronto Stack. And then he shows how he manipulates the stack by shifting and shaping the landscape and then adjusting it to relate to a specific condition. So the 3rd drawing is that the final iteration of that. And then showing what you can do with the Toronto Stack by lifting a component and then creating an outdoor landscape area between the top of it and the base of it. And then showing us what a skyline might look like in the development so that it's a blend of both. Again, iterative drawings, simple diagrams go a long way to explain design intent without having to talk with as many words as I've just used to describe it. These are very, very effective drawings that you have in your wheelhouse. Gosh, 3 terms: park connection, view preservation, 4th Avenue extension. Taking a simple rectangular volume, slicing it to create a connection to the park, and pulling it away, lower left, right? Unplugging a component the width of the 4th Avenue so that 4th Avenue can actually penetrate through the existing volume, right? And then slicing off a chamfer through several floors on the upper right corner to provide views to and from the building. A simple diagram shows program because of color, shows where the building is relative to other things. This one in Anchorage, Alaska. And it couldn't be clear. Again, 3 terms, very simple drawing, And you know what? The floor plans and sections and elevations, even the perspectives, were no more elaborate, right, than this. In other words, this architect really produced a very lean body of work in terms of graphic sensibility because it was so high in its content. Love this group of plates. Most of us think about architects as drawing on bum wad, right? The yellow tracing paper. That's old school. That, of course, is the way I draw. But this is proof that even students today still think this way. Don't underestimate the role that drawings like this will play in your final presentation. You can tape them to another board and photograph them. You can take them into Photoshop and color code them, right? You can recompose them like this so that there's transparency. Notice how there's site photographs under this drawing. There's a site plan under this drawing. And yet at the same time, it's just a series of site and elevation and three-dimensional iterations of what this student was trying to do in his neighborhood of Port Huron. So I really appreciate this. And this is kind of proof that we still draw this way, but I've learned from many of my colleagues over the years that we can draw lots of other ways. This is a map of Cincinnati, one of my hometowns. This is a map of bike routes that my student took through the city on a 5-day field trip to Cincinnati over the break, over actually Christmas break. He rode his bike through Cincinnati, and the line work he created here shows, again, I can't talk about it the way that Nate can, but it shows the energy of those places and of that route, and collapses all of it into a two-dimensional drawing. So he's able to somehow use line work and graphics as a way of describing place, but using a site plan. You know, you might use a GoPro more successfully, but I love how essential this drawing is, how this drawing is about the essence of those feelings. And, you know, again, it's just really, really beautiful. So is this. This is part Google Maps, and then it's tempered with kind of like a sepia overlay so that everything is given kind of a burnished, soft, leathery quality. And then there's some line work that's added to it, some strings that connect certain things to other certain things, and some points of interest that are color-coded. And then ultimately, the text is dropped on in Photoshop. It's really, really beautiful. It takes the straightforward copy clip of a Google Maps thing, which I would never encourage you to resort to or to rely on, and takes it into the realm of the artistic. Please try to take your work there. This is a redraw of the city's ordinance into a combination of both site plan and zoning map, and a location map for, again, the project in Anchorage, Alaska. Pretty cool to have a student in Anchorage while we were talking here in Detroit. But in any event, really, really clean graphics, really simple colors, consistent with everything else that they did in their presentation, and one of many that this individual used that semester. Getting back to simple drawings, missing middle housing, talking about plans, sections, and elevations. Beautiful drawings, very spare, simply colored, showing floor-to-floor heights, the thickness of structure, the human figure, right? Floor plans have section cuts and furniture. Open areas are X'd out so that we understand it that way. And elevations are color-coded to a legend that talks not about their specific product origin as much as they talk about things like transparency and semi-transparency, which I thought was really interesting. Remember that burnished sepia map of Detroit and Grosse Pointe that you saw? This individual did a combination of bas-relief floor plans and elevations. So these are actual shadows that you see from shining a light onto this drawing. So the walls of the architecture are sticks of like bamboo or basswood, and they're glued to the sheet. And then there are nails with strings that indicate the section cuts, right? Do you see that? And then text is then based onto the site plan. I'll zoom in for you. I can see Brandy straining, right? See the nails, see the shadows. And then these white and gray lines are the routes that certain family members that were living in this home would take on a day-to-day sort of journey throughout the house. And then get this, she did floor plans in simple color-coded diagrams. I didn't include them here, that took on documenting the movements of the individual in 15-minute increments throughout a 24-hour period for the 4 houses she designed. So she had literally dozens and dozens of floor plans that speculated on the transitory movements of an individual in her architecture. But the floor plans and the sections and the elevations were all done like this. And these things were only like, oh gosh, they were like 6 by 9. So these floor plans were very, very small. Elevations, street elevations, and sort of street sections, building sections, front to back on the top drawings, showing the open space between the main sort of townhome for this missing middle proposal and the garage, and then showing the materiality in the elevations below. And then the rooms are given a simple number that is associated with the program in the legend found in the upper right. But again, the sections show furniture, people, walls, doors, the grade line, the variation in grade line. They're always showing outside spaces. Even in the elevations, you see these outdoor gaps, the gaps between the buildings as outdoor spaces that could have seating with an umbrella on them. I appreciated the thoroughness of this. I appreciated in a similar fashion the spareness of this one. Notice how the sections, the 2 sections here, show the architecture is a real simple, dramatic, all black, all white kind of condition. But then the architecture beyond is dropped out as all white. And then the landscape, right, trees and the buildings beyond are photoshopped in. And then there's actually pictures of people, right? You see this guy with a necktie in the upper right. That becomes kind of the context for this individual's section drawings. The townhomes I just showed you a moment ago, the Revit model that he created was an opportunity to show the sectional virtues of the development through the entire site, the garage off to the left, the main building and the site in the middle, and then the sort of 3D massing of the development to the far right. And again, the materials are shown with some degree of accuracy, and at the same time, this drawing is also successful because it shows the sort of condition of how one might occupy the roofscape. The dude that looked at urban joinery also created a Revit model, actually a SketchUp model in this case, that looks at his infill in the context of other buildings within Cleveland, and then shows where that view is taken given the legend that he adds in the upper left. So the drawings are always instructive on their own. Connectivity, permeability, transparency. My friend in Hong Kong did this site section showing his architecture as a series of programs within the sort of quirky shapes of his architecture, showing the background and showing the context of Hong Kong beyond as the all-white buildings, and then showing, right, the site plan in light blue and gray with the red line work showing the section and the direction of the cut of the section for the drawing that you're looking at below. So again, showing plans and sections simultaneously, so that you're always grounded in the sort of content, in the explanation. An interior drawing. My friend that did the, Laura, that did the project in Royal Oak for the cancer kids, had this very special angled lattice window treatment that produces permeability and connectivity to the street, which she shows as a photograph beyond. But it's also this element that is in the foreground of those using the space. And then the space is framed in the second floor cut through her building. So I really thought this was just a beautiful drawing on its own right. Again, suitable for framing. Another drawing suitable for framing, this project by Amy in Defiance, Ohio, talking about the construction, talking about occupancy, talking about program, even in the upper right, talking about heat pumps and a case study that she was interested in a Water for People initiative that she learned about in Africa, and how that might relate back to what she was proposing for this community in northwestern Ohio. A beautiful series of drawings that culminate in this one drawing, a stunningly beautiful drawing that has a painterly watercolor kind of vibe. It's the same architecture seen, this time in elevation, showing occupancy, showing performance, showing context, and again, showing some of the landscape and the condition of the city beyond in a very light sort of fashion, again, to again, fill the sheet with content so that the audience is rewarded for staring, for lingering, for looking and falling into the artwork. You know, another option with your plans and sections and elevations is to use the white sheet as a canvas on which color can be applied to ground all of the work. Maybe not on every drawing, but I love the reference to blueprints, right, that were originally, even in my day, which is a long time ago, when you saw white prints on blue backgrounds, kind of the reverse of what blueprints became in the 1960s, but reminding us of the tradition of architects that reversed out the line work and the text and the architecture as a white condition on a uniform blue background. And this individual had 3 or 4 plates that used or deployed this kind of graphical language. There's more. Hang in there. We're only halfway there. Media. A lot of the ideas are not reducible to a drawing. Sometimes they are. I've never really talked about how you need to use Rhino or Revit or SketchUp or Adobe, although those are all useful tools. And for most of you, since you're all, you know, born with an iPad in your hands, most of you are digitally native today. And if you're not, certainly your kids will be. But like this individual did all of her work like the drawings on the top. Even the site plan below is hand drawn. Everything she drew was colored pencil, magic marker, and graphite. And I loved how courageous she was to do that, and how simple the drawings were to that end. All of her elevations, all of her perspectives, all of her floor plans were these beautiful works of architecture that reminded us, like Tom's drawing a moment ago, of the tradition of architects as drawers, as draftsmen. Or Joseph's piece here, showing kind of an axonometric perspective of his work at Northland Mall, creating a new transit center, showing the tracks, showing the roof that he had designed, showing the sort of energy of his architecture in this beautiful, almost Anselm Kiefer type drawing or painting. You know, when you get through with me, you've got your practice portfolio class, and you're going to have to like create a foreword, right? You're going to have a table of contents, right? You're going to have a bibliography at the end of it. You're going to have a frontispiece. You're going to have a cover. And this is the cover of one of those 8x8 portfolios. It's actually one of the drawings that Cody did. It's one of his really, really intense, because everything Cody did was intense. One of Cody's intense site plans, and so he found a way to integrate the his artwork into his cover. Or the Cleveland Kid, right? One of his sketches for his urban joinery project was this drawing that he did as a black felt tip on a yellow trace, and then took the drawing into Photoshop and gave it the orange color, because it reminded him of the color of the books that were produced back in the 1980s called Oppositions, which were the first theory of architecture books that he remembered reading, and he was referencing back to that publication. This was the cover of his book. Remember the young lady, Carrie, who actually works for me, the floor plans that she did in wood and nails and string. This was her benchmark review plate in October. So this was a series of conditions shown at the same time, elevations that were street photographs or photographs of the street elevations, aligned with a site plan, aligned with the sort of orientation of the compass that is north, south, east, west. So this drawing is something that you could rotate 90 or 45 or 180 degrees and read into it for new content. So this was something that you could actually be intimate with, that you actually had to hold in two hands to understand and read and accrue what she was getting at with this drawing. Oh yeah, Lena. So this is a site plan that is a photograph of Cleveland, and she began to take the area that she was studying, and she wove, right? She wove fabric, paper actually, into this large 3-foot by 3-foot model of her site, into this beautiful site drawing that showed her development, which are the red edged pieces that you see in the very middle of this drawing. This was at one moment an aerial photograph from Google Earth printed onto MDF board that then had the weaving application grafted to the site plan, and then she made a photograph of it and took it into Photoshop. Caitlin, arguably one of the best students I've ever had, who works for me, up until you guys, of course, looked at folding as a way of understanding the topography of a place. So took a series of photographs from Google Earth, mounted them to board, and then photographed the folded that neighborhood into these discrete conditions or tines, and then created a project actually that resulted from that. So I showed you the drawings that she did that showed the moves that she went through, but I love that the Google Earth drawing was then grafted to cardstock and then folded, much like one might fold something to stand up on its own to give the site stability. Don't do this at home. This was an individual that looked at resin, pouring hot resin into a mold and then extracting elements from it, so that what resulted was the sort of figuration of a shape, so that voids had a positive geometry. So this was an individual that actually tried to explore form and space by using obviously toxic materials, but created something really quite beautiful out of it. Lena, who did the weavings of the city of Cleveland, also used plaster and found posters to create this miniature version of Cleveland, which is the white cube of this model. And then she shows you her interpretation of her site in her early benchmark review. And then Brian, Angry Brian, used perforated metal as a way of exploring the sort of conditions that he was interested in. He was the guy that I showed you earlier that had the loop drawing that had several projects associated with it, a table, a chair. This is actually part of a lamp that he ended up designing, but these are images from his use of metal. This is just regular corrugated cardboard that's been cut and then torn to represent the grade of a landscape in northern Michigan and the trees that filled that landscape. This actually happens to be something that she documented when she went to the design retreat and came back and then made this model to refer back to the sort of spatial experience that she had when she was there. This was an individual that looked at foam core as a way of cutting and then layering the architecture into an urban sort of landscape. Simple, but beautiful. Wood, laminated wood is plywood, and then using this unusual sort of lamination to create the sort of topography of the site that they had to work with, and then introducing the foundation, which you see in gray, which is just cardstock or chipboard, and then the vertical posts become the columns for the building, and then you see the actual framing of the home. This was an earlier iteration of missing middle housing for Lansing. Similarly, I can't remember exactly what Max was going after for this. This was in Muskegon, but they had created almost like a board game that talked about the site as a series of discrete figure ground drawings, which you see in the left, and each of these plug into the channels or plows that you see on the right, and then the black and white drawing on the photograph of the board is the cumulative site plan, a beautiful drawing. And not limited to the condition of size, I'm not persuaded that intimacy was a virtue. Irena, the architect who works, well, actually both of them have worked for us. Irena is still with us. Irena is the architect who made this large, occupiable, three-dimensional landscape that you actually had to experience in order to understand her proposal. So the range of media can vary, but I really appreciated you know, their courage to explore those things. And then lastly, in this this one group is this plate, which is an example of what might happen if you're invited to submit for fine grain, where you have to take the entire year that or the entire semester, and you have to create a composite sheet that is used used by the full-time faculty to evaluate the merit of the studio and your sort of potential for a prize. And then finally, as we move into the last category of renderings, I want to show you some of the work that they've done that is kind of all over the place. This one happens to be Revit with Photoshop, kind of a Revit, an example of Revit from about 5 years ago. An individual that's very strong with Revit, but to be honest, relied on Revit for things like the pavers, things like the grass, things like the people, things like the light fixtures. And I would encourage you all to explore other processes beyond Revit. And I would say the same thing certainly for SketchUp. Don't rely on the design software like Revit, Rhino, or SketchUp as the rendering be all and end all. I think you really need to take it into more suitable and relevant applications. This one's a SketchUp drawing. Again, probably 4 years ago. The beautiful thing about this drawing is that it shows context. Don't ever show your work without context. Is it an identifiable context? Maybe not. There is some license in Shayna's drawing here in that regard, but she had several drawings that were perspectives because she had drawn several renderings. We were able to piece together the context. This context was a lot more implicative and in some ways is more problematic. So it's really important that you ground your work in context. I can't believe at this level that I have to say that, but it's true. You will forget to do that somehow. You'll have a brain fart and you'll think that you're all done rendering your thing and you'll go, voila, it's beautiful, and you'll forget it and you'll hear, why the hell didn't you do anything about the context? Where's the context? Where is this? I don't understand what I'm looking at here. And it'll be the kiss of death for you. So this is a very important challenge for you. A Revit drawing, a little clumsy, but is dealing with some important things like context. I think another thing that's important about like this drawing and this drawing is that the horizon line of the perspective is and the people in it is the horizon line of the viewer. I think this is a very important thing. You need to have more perspectives that illustrate that condition than aerial perspectives. There are virtues and benefits to drawing aerial perspectives, and you need to be very, you need to be sensitive and careful about when you do that. But more often than not, people take the perspective of, like with the kids on the left, 14 feet or 16 feet up in the air, a perspective that no one in the world humanly has. The benefit, though, of what Ben did here is that this perspective is consistent with the people in the space through the patio's looking glass. When you look to the right, you see people occupying his building, which is at eye level. I also appreciate how there's kind of very little of his architecture shown and more about the space around the architecture and a little bit more still about context. This is a very clever device for you to use. I think all too often we think that we need to show the whole building because there's some notion that you gotta bear all. And sometimes it's maybe a little bit more interesting when you show just a little skin. Maybe not everything. And so that drawing by Shayna does that. And I think this drawing, right, by Ben does that. And then Ben does a drawing like this that kind of shows it all. So again, you have to look at what the money shot is, and you have to look at when to do that. But Ben did draw this perspective where the horizon line was low, And that means that the building is a little bit more exaggerated. This drawing is also a little different than his other one because this one is showing it on a typical cloudy day in Michigan. This one is showing the building at twilight. So this one is trying to dial in the architecture and the mood of the building and the materials of the building at a very specific time of day that is a powerful time because it shows the building as an occupiable thing. It shows interior lighting, and it shows that moment at the time of day when it's both sunlight and sunset. And that's actually when that gloaming light is warmest. And it's also when the sky is the darkest and maybe the most moody, right? I'm a big fan of real people, right? Like this, and to some extent that. Not a big fan of the ET phone home people, right? The ghosty people. Just so you know, so when we're working in an office together, you already know that prerogative. This is actually a very old rendering, all done in Revit, that literally took a photograph of their site. This is Joe's site. I just saw Joe the other day. Took a photograph of his site, and not at a great time of day, but at a kind of a neutral time of day. This is a site in Chicago, and he aligned his perspective and model with that photograph. He found the perspectival vanishing points and horizon line in the photograph, and then calibrated it to the model. A very, very clever and simple way to contextualize your architecture, and then added on people in the photograph and use the existing cars from the photograph as a way of dialing it in, right? Notice that the architecture is also showing some sensibility about materials and showing a great deal of information about pattern and texture, shade, and shadow. So this guy did most of his work 2 years ago in freehand, and then took it into Revit. And then over the weekend, and this was an old guy, by the way, learned Lumion and did all of his renderings in this high contrast, almost chiaroscuro quality of Lumion for his missing middle housing scenario. And I think the beautiful thing about this software is, as you've heard me say, it helps you dial in a very specific time of the day. This was done in Grasshopper originally, and the design was so that it was done with a series of algorithms and then rendered in Revit with SketchUp. A beautiful rendering of really dramatic architecture. This was Stephen's money shot. You know, I'm not a fan of the ghosty people. Here's why. They look menacing and they look distracting because they're dark, right? Anything that's dark in a light background, or anything that's light in a dark background, is going to have kind of a high status or high valency, high degree of attraction. And really the space should have that, not the people. So there's kind of a misstep in this drawing, but I really love how this individual, also a sort of a senior citizen, I get a lot of those in my studios, trying to work with a software that she had never worked with before, created something really beautiful about the space, and talked about communal kitchens, talked about a communal space, and talked about the sort of degree of occupancy that can happen in her architecture. And so I think it has its merit in terms of what she was able to do. But like, the great thing about a studio like this is you can see a drawing like this, which is Revit with Photoshop. And this is, you know, this could be, right, this could be in a magazine. just like this one could. So these are interior drawings, which are very acceptable. And then this is kind of an interior drawing of an exterior space. High degree of confidence in color and composition. Not sure what this guy is doing here, except looks like he's going into a breakdance mode. And then the guy that tried Lumion for the first time, that high contrast quality, was able to render kind of an interior vibe with an exterior space in this drawing. So these are great examples of, again, not rendering all of the architecture, but giving you a glimpse of the architecture, giving you some finer grain, giving you some detail about the public spaces. How much stronger this drawing would be if the people were somehow in a lighter sort of configuration in the middle of the drawing. You can still have an interior space with an outdoor kind of landscape. This is a full-blown urban scape. This is that guy in Toronto that was looking at the Toronto stack. And this drawing is showing, obviously, cafe life in Toronto in his development. Beautiful drawing. This was also the cover of his book. Sometimes the elevations and perspectives can be more than just beautiful money shots. They can be informative, right? So in this drawing, they are talking certainly about the materials, but look off to the right. The numbers relate to cost per square foot. So these drawings are referencing the pro forma, right, of the architecture, which I think is really splendid. A night shot. Not quite the gloaming shot, but the sunset shot that illustrates the architecture as a fully illuminated, lantern, and still at the same moment able to describe, because of the way light is reflecting off of exterior building materials like the fences and the walls, showing what the brick looks like, showing what the railings look like, and then showing basically the rear facade of one of the townhomes. Beautiful, beautiful drawing. Another beautiful drawing, a very ambitious project that shows the potential of multiple buildings in a site on the Detroit River. This is a really old Revit drawing from 2010. And yet at the same time, it's still one of my favorites because it's so spare and so simple. Another one of the Toronto stack renderings showing a specific condition of the architecture relative to the roofscape, but also showing the population using the proposed development that you see in the gap right between the buildings. The townhomes, so this is like both perspective and elevation, showing, again, real people on real Cannondale bikes, real brick material, real stone and wood material, even the idea of people occupying the roofscape. These are all in your wheelhouse to use. Adam, looking at the Ambassador Bridge, began to sort of study what it might be like to imagine housing that could grow on the Ambassador Bridge the way barnacles or moss grow on a dock, using the bridge as an infrastructural condition to promote density and housing across the Detroit River. A beautiful drawing that is basically all in black and white. You can have a great rendering without color. Another example of the point and stack, this one again in Revit, showing the architecture as a very simple pattern, not showing windows, not showing materials, just showing it as kind of a diamond harlequin or reticulated grid pattern. but showing the landscape, showing occupancy, showing the sort of virtue of the reflecting pond as a reflecting thing, and showing the sunlight sparkling off the left-hand most tower to give the rendering a photoreal kind of quality. Another example of Brandon's missing middle housing, showing the perspective of the townhomes. And then Tom's example of missing middle housing as a series of perspectives. It's risky to do this. It's risky to put 3 perspectives on one plate, but changing their size, giving them a frame, changing their viewpoints so that they don't all look the same. And in this case, I think the aerial perspective works very, very well for him. Close up at ground level and one at the distance from ground level, I think, along with the aerial shot, tell a very successful story. And quite honestly, he only had one other perspective. This was the guy that did the blueprint plates that I showed you earlier. These were all in, I think, V-Ray. And then lastly, Amy's perspective, taking a photograph of her city from the bridge along the river, and then introducing her architecture, which is part billboard and part apartment building, and then treating it as this almost storm-like moment that creates this almost otherworldly ambiance and character, dreamscape, if you will, almost like a surrealist painting or a Dadaist painting from the 1920s, an utterly beautiful drawing that, and I don't know how she did this, but when she printed it and mounted it on the board, the Defiance sign seemed to actually glow. This was a tour de force drawing for my money, and this was a very large drawing. This was about 5 feet long and about 2 feet tall, and it was utterly stunning. So the idea that a drawing can have mood, character, and even, you know, luminosity, God, great stuff. You know, I've seen a lot of drawings in my time. You may not know this, but I've actually been teaching since '82. And I thought that to prove that, I would show you this picture, right, of my teaching days at Mississippi State. I'm the tall one on the right. You see that over there? But notice that that's our own Martin Schwartz off to the left. He looks like a lumberjack with his beard. He didn't even remember having a beard back then. I texted him this image today or yesterday morning. He's like, what on earth are you going to talk about relative to that slide? And I guess what I would say, I didn't explain it to him because he doesn't get me a lot of the time, but I think what I really love about teaching and what I love about this particular talk is that, and I haven't given it but 3 times now, is that I think it's really an important thing to take stock of, you know, the work of students that comprise your community, your classmates, your fellow alums, to help you do better than you thought you could do for us in the weeks to come. So I hope that tonight's sort of talk maybe enhanced the sort of sensibility about what you have as an opportunity, and that you really could take this as a real serious moment to do some of the best work that you've done for your graduate career. So that's what I wanted to go over tonight. Any questions about anything that you saw? Okay, I'd be stunned too if I saw all of that. I worked on that all weekend. I love doing that. I love seeing all of that stuff. And I swear to you that I want to add your drawings to the presentations for next fall, God willing that they invite me back, especially as I was explaining to Adam and Brianna after my schedule screw up today. We're not really confident that I'm coming back in the fall, but we'll keep our fingers crossed on that. Okay. So who do I talk with first, second, and then third? Brianna first? No, Brandy first, Brianna second, and then Drew. Okay, I'll see you all on Wednesday night. That session will start at 6:30, and then we will have class next week. No lecture. We will not have class the week of the 17th and the 19th. So you will not get a sign-up sheet on the 16th. But if you're wanting to talk to me, I'm agreeable to meeting with you. You will need to email me and or text me. But please don't text me on Monday night at 8 o'clock while I'm watching Who's Your Dad and distract me from that drama. Let me know in advance so that I can work you into the schedule. I'm happy to meet with you on that Monday night. I will not watch all of that episode, but I just like to know in advance, especially if there's an opportunity for me and for Tracy and me to go out. But I'm happy to meet with you on the 17th or the 19th, and but I'm reviewing on the 22nd in Ohio, so I won't be able to talk to you that Saturday. But I could talk to you on Sunday the 23rd. Pencils down is the 25th, the following week. We will have a very brief class on the 24th, probably not till since Brandy drives. So we'll have a 5:30 class on the 24th. That just goes over the protocol for the final reviews and a head count on in terms of who's coming in. And then I'm happy to meet with you on Wednesday, the 26th, if you want to do a dry run, but I was not planning on scheduling class that night. And then we will have our last class, which will be a long one, on May 5th, the 1st, May 1st, the first Monday in May 1st. That will be a group comment session and then individual reviews. And then I'll wish you well for the summer. Clear as crystal? Great. So Brandy, you have the floor. Thanks, guys. Were you able to get anything done since Saturday?
Yeah, I added quite a bit of windows, but I'm not completely finished yet.
I didn't think you would be, but I'm glad you looked at it.
Running into some issues with my floor plans. I'm going to have to rework some things. Can you see my screen?
I can.
So the townhomes I've been sort of focusing on the most. Some of these lines you can ignore. They're just things that need sort of hidden on the facades. And I changed my materials to only stone and wood. And then, of course, like we talked about, the glass doesn't really count as a material.
Yeah.
So I'm using a horizontal wood and a vertical wood. And then I just have like the same thing going on along this side. I'm trying to put just windows in locations where they need to be relative to the floor plans.
Yeah.
And then it's hard because my site is so narrow, I guess, where all of the views are facing, it seems to be like within the patio, the courtyard.
Mm-hmm.
So I do want to pull these out and then do sort of like a Romeo and Juliet balcony, but I just need to I think I want to push the door back slightly and then put like a railing there.
Mm-hmm.
But pulling that out.
So what's the brown material?
This is wood.
Uh-huh. How is that wood different than the gray wood?
It is the vertical.
Can you zoom in on that? Okay, I see. Gotcha. Have you ever designed a house or a building with wood?
No.
Okay, so the wood siding, look at the corner. Zoom in on that little
This corner?
No, the other one. I get that's fine, but like when those two planks come together at the corner,
Mm-hmm.
there's usually a trim board there,
Yep.
right, to conceal the nails, right, that were used to anchor it to the sheathing and the studs behind it, and then or in many cases the trim goes up first and then the siding is laid up inside of it,
Mm-hmm.
right? So there's like a whole level of like line work that when you start deploying when you start drawing that,
Mm-hmm.
you're going to go, God, this architecture got really busy.
Yeah. This is what I
So
hate about SketchUp.
say that again.
I said, this is what I hate about SketchUp.
Yeah.
You get like stuck inside of the building somewhere.
Yeah, I know what you mean. So that's the first thing. The second thing, I
then
really like how you're just looking at like horizontal and vertical wood siding. I think that's probably the right discipline to go with here. So I feel good about that. I feel like also that there could be more windows.
Yeah, and that was one thing I was sort of struggling with because this, the fourplex, so I have there's one unit on the first level and another unit on the second, but then this ceiling height is much taller on the second level because I wanted to bring this roof up high enough to allow the live work to access the roof. So it's like a much taller building than what like the
Well, you could
first-
step down to that roof. You don't have to build a really tall ceiling to accommodate that.
Okay.
I personally think that in residential, you don't need anything more than a 9-foot ceiling, 10-foot tops.
Mm-hmm. And that's what I was trying to keep it around was the 9-10 mark.
Right. So, I mean,
But
you
then
could have
this one I
stairways
think was-
down to that lower roof from the live work.
Okay.
I think that would be fine.
And I thought
Um,
about just bringing the windows, like having taller windows, but then I was sort of really getting confused at what to do with some of the.
Right, because that
Material.
see that's you break the rule and then you have to start making more decisions about. You have to make more decisions, which is why I think for young designers and for the best architects, they limit the materials.
Mhm.
So I'm looking at this street facade, and I kind of see like this equivalent interval of brick, window, brick, window, brick, window, and that A interval is kind of monotonous. So when you alternate that, like ABA, for
Mhm.
example, or ABBAC, for example, the facade gets richer. That becomes very important, right, when you're on a street like this. So can we zoom in on those windows, for example, or yeah. So like, what if the two windows that are closest to each other,
Mhm.
the two window groups, what if they got like closer still?
Okay.
Then they start to create their own sense of geometry relative to everything else. And then the other windows sort of stand on their own. And not everything has to be 3Zs. You can do 2Zs, 4Zs, and 1Zs, for example. That helps break up and the rhythm of things and create the richness that we're kind of talking about.
Mm-hmm.
The stone, you can also do things. So stone actually has headers and sills too that you don't generally get in wood. So that's another detail that with a project of this size and scale that you need to be like dealing with. Do you follow what I'm saying?
Yep.
Let's go back to the other side, which has more, the parking garage building. The one next to it, yeah.
This one?
Yeah. So like to me, that gray part, that doesn't look residential still, right? The window groups in that gray bar over the parking garage still has kind of a commercial vibe to it. So I'd like you to study that a little bit more. Where is the sill height of these windows, particularly the groups of threes? How far above the floor are those?
The low ones, I think, were 2'8". I can't remember what these.
Oh,
ones
those are
Let me
4 or 5
remember.
then.
Yeah, I
So-
think this was because of the kitchen, so I wanted them above the counter.
Yeah. So in a kitchen, you could do 2 windows over the counter, but everything else you can go down as low as like 13 inches above the floor.
Okay.
That gives you room for the sill, the apron, some drywall with a plug, and a base molding. Right? When you think about it, like when you draw that in elevation or when you draw that in section, you can have all of those things and still have a sill that's 13 inches above the floor. Here's my point. I feel like the most significant thing that separates builder housing, developer housing from architect design housing are the windows and the figure ground of the windows, the amount and size of windows in a development. And so don't be stingy with them,
Okay.
right? Can you rotate this thing around?
Yeah.
This really took a big jump forward.
And then I started to draw these sort of balconies like we talked, but I didn't get very far with that.
Yeah.
But it's hard. I've had to like work in section just so I can actually work on the facades because
I bet.
it's so narrow.
I bet. So why did you pick siding? Like plank siding?
I guess I was trying to use materials that are used in this neighborhood, but not in the same way or not the same exact type of siding, but the same material.
Mm-hmm. What kind of buildings, can you close this for a second? What kind of buildings do you guys do with your office?
We do mostly schools. Sometimes, I mean, we kind of get into like a lot of different things, but I've been mostly working on schools, and then I really haven't done any residential at all. So
It's a lot of fun.
definitely, yeah, it's new for me.
Can you open up your browser and share it with me and type in like Okoskin, OKOSKIN? I think that's what it's called.
Mhm.
So this is like sheet. Yeah. So this is a product, like look at that plate or the one underneath it.
Mhm.
And it can come in siding.
Yeah, that's nice.
You see how they did it here? And because so you should look this product up and understand how it's detailed, right? And because it allows you, Brandy, to do look at the third image on the top, the corner shot.
Yeah.
It allows you to do that miter that you've
Yes,
drawn.
seamless corner. Mhm.
But also look at the variation of color that can result from that product.
is this like a fiber cement or no?
Yeah,
Okay.
it's fiber reinforced concrete. So it's really a rain screen.
Yeah.
It can go vertical, it can go horizontal. It can have exposed exposed fasteners or concealed fasteners. We use this almost exclusively now.
On typically residential projects?
Mixed use mostly.
Yes.
So rather than like looking at like hardy plank or wood siding, I would encourage you to go up a notch and look at a rain screen scenario, which is evident in the like the fourth image, you know, the detail shots that you had up a minute ago. I don't know where they went, but in any event,
These ones?
you made those the third and the fourth image there. Right. So I would look toward that.
Okay.
Yeah, fiber reinforced concrete it's a little bit more expensive and it's highly durable. So you pay more initially, but the longer term is really important.
Yeah.
I also feel like you need to look at the work of architects that have done this kind of like townhomes and things like that. You need to study their proportions. You need to study the amount. You almost need to do an analysis of somebody's elevation drawings to try and understand what I'm saying about privileging glass and composing windows so that they relate to the functions inside, but they also relate to each other. The elevation is a composition, right? An elevation is not just a result of where the builder dropped the windows in. Windows are composed, whether they're composed to be intrinsic to the space itself, or whether they're composed as an overall, if you will, gestalt of the street front. So this is stuff that takes a little bit of, like I was saying on Saturday, right? The overlays, and you kind of need to do that. You're moving in the right direction, but I feel like it still needs a lot of like pressure from you to do that. But you're going in the right direction. But I would look at the Oco skin. Otherwise, if you're going to go like typical wood siding, because that's what you found in Dublin, you're going to be like dying when you draw in all of the trim boards.
Yeah.
Because they're everywhere.
Yeah.
They're on the rakes that slope. They're on the corners. They're on both faces of the corners. And then they're skirt boards at the bottom. Oh my God! It's just like, it's unbelievable. So the Oco skin's a little bit different because it's more about plane and because it's more about rain screen.
And that's really what I was sort of going for, I guess, within the case studies I was looking at, just something that really didn't have all of those trim pieces and is a little bit cleaner, smoother look.
Gotcha. Okay, anything else we need to go over?
I don't think so.
Keep pressing. I'm around this weekend if you need to share anything with me. Probably don't have any data left on your account after Saturday's 30-minute
It
sessions.
hasn't ran out yet, but it's until the 20th of this month, so we'll probably run out early.
Keep your fingers crossed. Okay, thanks a lot.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye. Hey, Brianna, how are you tonight?
I think I'm next, actually.
Oh, you're up through? Okay.
Yeah.
How are
And
you
I don't
tonight?
know if I'm good. My internet might be really spotty tonight.
Okay.
So I apologize in advance. Just let me know if I caught like every other or every third slide of your presentation tonight.
Oh, really?
So, yeah.
Oh, that's a bummer.
Kind of was depressing.
Yeah, especially
where-
since you pay for internet, right?
Yeah. I'm gonna screen share real quick.
Okay.
So I was looking at diagramming right now.
Yep.
Let me know if you can see that.
I do have it.
And this is the apartment building, the long bar. So vertical circulation, community space, retail space, and then on the right is the various bedrooms, from 1 bedroom to 1.5 bedroom to 2, and then I even fit in a 3-bedroom instance just for this building. So trying to dial in the range of size of dwelling units and
Sure.
what's found within. So that's that piece. I need to get back to this diagram that I showed you a while ago
Yeah.
about just the roof shapes. And then we also talked about the window configurations and doing another iteration of that. So I'm working on that one as well.
I forgot about this drawing.
Yeah, I just the simplicity of it, but the complications and the random assortments of window or door shapes and roof shapes and which is very nice. And then the other thing that I sent you an email about was about the color edition.
Yeah.
And so I started to limit a little bit more and tried to not pull as many windows into the units, and I still get quite a bit of range of color in like this fashion.
Mm-hmm.
Still not sure about it yet, but almost getting point to crunch time.
Can you just let me walk down the street a little bit, see what that looks like as it unfolds, or let me look at it from like a across the river?
Yeah. So across the river, you don't see a whole lot.
Yeah, I didn't think you would. Mm-hmm.
But then if you're floating down the river a little bit, I guess still tough to see.
Mm-hmm.
The other part too was then if you look at like this,
Mm-hmm.
and this was looking at it as like a level strips.
Yeah.
Highlights the elongation of the building. And so you can travel down and still see it all.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
And what I like about that is how the belt keep flying at you.
Yeah. Did you appreciate the work of Sauerbruch and Houghton?
Yeah, I did.
They're a great firm.
Really, just really leery about doing a little too much.
Yeah. Well, they're not.
But
Yeah.
I know you got to take that stance.
Yeah. So I'm not going to answer the question about whether or not.
No,
I think that's something you have to decide.
I'll get there.
I think that there's a couple of ways to look at it. One is that the addition of color to this level, like what you're proposing, could be read by many people as something that is accessible and charming or whimsical, capricious, friendly. You know what I'm saying? I mean, I think that color, childlike, right? I think that color tends to promote those associations, whether they're founded and justified or not. I think that tends to be the case. But you also have to be really good with it and do it properly at the same time. The second thing I would say is that you should try to ask the question, what prompted you to think about color as the next step? Was there something else sort of nagging you or bugging you, or was it an agenda that you've always had with the project? And let that dog hunt. Find out what the answer to that question is, and then let the answer get pursued that way. I will tell you that in our own work, we've introduced color at window jams like this, and it's actually very beautiful. We've not done it to the sort of rainbow palette that you've done it, but we've done it, and it is a defining, condition within the language of our buildings, and it's something that we're doing kind of frequently now. So, it has some application.
I have asked why was I looking at doing that, and I think I was more just trying to give it a little bit more of the family friendly feeling and child friendly. And I did introduce some green to it, but I was thinking just the basics: red, blue, and yellow.
Yeah.
Just for primary colors,
Right.
but just to give it a little bit more of the family fun. Kids want to come here and see colors. And not let it be
the
so
issue
stark.
of using only red, blue, and yellow is that it also has direct associations for a chunk of people to Piet Mondrian's paintings, right? Which you probably know about, right? The white canvases with the black grid, and then some of the grid has squares that are red, some have squares that are yellow, some have squares that are blue, and he really kind of only used those colors. So it's kind of worth thinking about that too, is where has color created these direct associations, and those colors, if you type in red, yellow, blue, Mondrian probably comes up under Google. I would be surprised if it didn't, but you still don't know his paintings?
No.
Type
No
it in
idea.
and you'll see it.
How do you spell his last name?
Mondrian. Mondrian. Yep. Bingo.
I see.
Now the palette of Sauerbruch and Hutten, if you just type them in and maybe do the police station that they did, Sauer, there you are. Sauerbruch. There it is.
Yeah. Internet, like I said, real slow.
It's the third one down.
I don't know how you see it because I can't see it yet.
No, Sauerbruch and Hutten. Type in.
Yeah, I know it's coming up.
Yeah, so there's the images there on the right. So I'm just looking at what you got there. You might want to type in police station. This was an addition to an old building, and it's kind of this curtain wall element that's glommed onto this stone.
I don't know what's going on with my internet.
Yeah, you are running slow tonight, aren't you?
Yeah, it's, I don't know. Driving me nuts. I don't know. I'll look it up.
Okay.
I'm not going to waste time. Get off the screen share. So that's kind of, I'm just pushing the buildings forward. And I got to start diagramming some things. I got the floor plans, I think, finalized for the most part. Just
Yeah.
finished up the middle multiplex, which I might call it a condo.
Gotcha.
To give it, instead of a renter thing, more you could buy if you wanted to mix that up a little bit too.
Sure.
And then just really trying to hone in on what the diagrams are going to be in the clearest fashion.
Brilliant. Let me know what you decide about the color. I'm real interested. I think you need to, when you evaluate that, Drew, I think you need to make sure you dial in the accurate color of the skin around the windows. Make sure that you've rendered that or captured that correctly, because I think, you know, the color depends on that stuff too. The success of the color that you use depends on the comparison between the skin and the color.
Yeah, see, I was I got to look into what the final outcome is for Lumion, so I can either get the pro version of education or not. And then I thought about doing a diagram too of just like that window situation and showing if the window is flush mount, set back 3 inches, or set back, 7 or 8 inches.
Right.
A real simple diagram, detail almost of that, which I think could be really cool.
You know, the other option is that, like in the work of Loha, for example, when they slice through the building, when they create notches or mortises, much the way one slices through an apple or a pineapple, right? The skin is one thing, but the fruit is another. It's another material. It's another color. So those inset balconies and those notches throughout the building are opportunities or moments that you can introduce color if you decide not to do the jams, for example.
I was doing this thing. I said watermelon last week, I think.
Yeah.
And that's the way I was treating it. I was doing the same thing with the apartment building, but I was thinking of just the apartment building having that splash of color, so that's a little bit more friendly.
Sure.
The length, and maybe it's more a fun billboard look instead of just this long piece of architecture.
So, but those are questions.
And then letting the massing.
And those are the answers are ones that you're going to have to answer, right?
Right. That's it.
Well, I don't have anything else. You are breaking up. You're about a minute behind. Your video is about a minute behind your audio. I'm hearing everything, but somebody must be using your internet tonight, Tim or Drew.
I don't know what's going on. I'll fix it. More frustrating, so I don't want to.
No problem. I'm around this weekend if you need me.
All right, thanks.
Okay. See you, Drew.
Bye.
Hi, Brianna. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good, thanks.
Okay, so I'm going third, not second. Sorry. So I downloaded Lumion and I was going to try and use it, but it took up too much space on my computer for me to even do anything with it.
Oh my goodness.
I couldn't even use Photoshop really because I only had like hardly any room left. So I'm gonna try. I haven't done a lot of actually putting materials on my model in Revit because I think I'm going to try to export my Revit model into SketchUp and then use the Podium stuff that we have at the office to do the renderings.
Gotcha.
So if I did that, I have to put all the materials on it again. So I'm kind of holding off on that until I decide how I'm going to get that done. What did you think of those Revit renderings that I sent you last week?
Yeah, well, they're sort of, well, what do you think I'm going to say?
They're not that wonderful, but they're decent.
They're decent, right? They're decent. And you did those in school, and I think they're useful for that context. What I'm trying to create for you is, and I remember you showed me those renderings early in the semester when you all were asked to sort of revisit one of your favorite projects or your first ADS one studio. And I remember those drawings when you shared them with me. I was like, oh yeah, I remember. She showed us these. So I'm not going to say that they're good or bad. They were very, very useful for the role that they had in them. But I would also say that they showed a limitation insofar as they were sort of just the Revit rendering software, didn't like layer in all of the other ingredients, right? Software ingredients that we're sort of accustomed to doing. And I may be one of the only people that kind of advocate for the inclusion of that post-processing software at Lawrence Tech, but we do it, so I gotta believe at Hamilton Anderson, I gotta believe that other professors who practice are encouraging you to do that as well. Maybe that John's just not, maybe he's not familiar with it, or maybe it's not as important to him. But for me, I'm trying to get you guys to do the very best renderings that you possibly can. I'm trying to get you to get your stock raised, right? Because if you can show work that's even better than the work you did in the first semester, it's showing improvement, it's showing growth, and that's the stuff that causes salary increases, right? That's the stuff that raises your stock, and that's what I hope happens for you.
Yeah, I'm just kind of nervous about the programs as of now, because I was like, oh, Lumion, cool, I can download it for free, and then I was kind of banking on that.
Yeah.
And it was like, oh, it's not going to work out. We haven't really, I know Drew said something that he was going to look into getting a better version of it, but I don't
like a professional educational version or something. He hasn't done that yet, but and I don't know about the others yet, but you can only do what you can do. But definitely don't rely on like SketchUp, for instance, for the trees. Don't rely on SketchUp for peoples and cars. Just be really, really careful about that. You saw tonight the way that you can blend those things, but don't rely on the software. Don't default to that software for the entourage stuff.
Right. I will try my best.
Cool.
I was working on a few things today. Let me show you. So kind of going back to my presentation a little bit toward the end.
Mm-hmm.
So the order of this is, this is kind of getting into the story of the community and how it impacts people, and then it gets into the narratives. And then from there, I go into the program and how this is shared housing and what kind of amenities it's going to have and the viewports that are important. And then I'm going into how it actually works for people. And I think that might have been kind of pushed to the wayside in my past presentation because I put it in too late. So I think moving it here will be a little bit better.
Right.
A little bit better sequencing. And then I was trying to think of what graphic way I could show this slide. And I was trying to think of maybe little logos for each of these kind of things. But I was like, I'm not really sure what a logo of that looks like. So I'm still working on this kind of graphic because I think that's important to the project as well. And it goes along with the narrative. I went and put these into single slides. Like I was kind of given a tip to do single slides instead of everything on one slide. And I'm going to go back through Google SketchUp and work on the graphics of this so it's not like a gray background, and maybe do more sketchy versions of this. And then I go back to my program and laying it out in the actual spaces. So these are just the sketches.
Mhm.
And then I tried to make this diagram a little bit clearer because I did get some feedback that it wasn't super clear. So maybe a little bit of text will help. Completely separate rooms and then flexible interior walls to connect family units. And then on the following slide, I did the day and night type of idea, which I was focusing on in the presentation last time. And this one hasn't really changed. So I'm going to show you the Revit model. I've been thinking about doing different, not instead of flat roofs, sloping the roofs. So this one is kind of one large. I've tried doing it a couple different ways, but this way works pretty nicely, I think. I took the rooms on the second floor and bumped them out. It's like a 3-foot overhang. So it kind of bumps out on each of the sides. So it differentiates on the facade the more private spaces and more public spaces. So you see that over here as well.
Mhm.
What do you think of this type of roof instead of the flat roof?
Well, why don't you explain to me what your motive is with that? My immediate reaction is big. It feels really big suddenly.
Mhm.
Do you feel that way?
Yeah, I was trying to do a smaller slope so it doesn't lift up as large.
I don't even mean tall. I mean heft. Like that facade. That's got wingspan now, right? The street facade that if you rotate, yeah, that suddenly is one huge big thing. And I have trouble linking that back to your site plan. Where is that view, for example?
The site plan?
Yeah, like where is that in?
I mean, it's kind of right here.
So is it the street facade or?
This right here is the street facade.
Yeah,
We were just looking at.
yeah.
Because I wasn't sure if the flat roof gave me the look that I was going for. Because when you look at those original sketches, and I liked the idea of having a peaked roof, but it kind of didn't turn out that way. So
Well, why is there so little glass too? And why does that whole first floor in the one wing have no glass on the street?
This one?
Yeah.
This right now is the poly brick.
Gotcha.
So this is like the laundry room and the play area and bathrooms and the study.
Mm-hmm.
So my idea for this is that they don't necessarily need punched windows onto the street. Well, especially not the playroom. I kind of haven't decided if the laundry room needs that or not.
But can you put a window in poly brick?
Yeah.
Uh-huh. So
Yeah.
the study could have a window, for example?
Right. It's kind of just a pasted on element for now. But windows on the street are probably important.
What? Wow, I was not expecting this. I'm just going to say that. I feel like the concern I have is that this is a really small lot. It's a small site of small lots, and that the grain, bear with me here, I'm kind of forming my reactions. You completely caught me off guard with this. The grain of the neighborhood of house, small space, right? That interval I'm not getting that here. I kind of get it if you let me see that courtyard view there a little bit more. I kind of get it on the left-hand piece, but even then, it's all under one big roof. And I'm wondering if, gosh, who can you see? Who can you look at that does this? Bear with me a second.
Well, I was trying to change a few extra things on the exterior in response to you saying that it didn't have the architectural form that you thought that it should have.
Wait, can you say that again? Because you broke up when you said it.
Well, your response a while ago to the presentation, to the benchmark review, was that this architecture didn't really have the form that you thought that it should have. So I was trying to play with a few different masses
Sure.
on the buildings, which obviously included changing the roof a little bit.
Do you remember the one you showed me, which was Armstrong Senior Housing?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm back at their website, and now I'm looking at Onozuka. Can I screen share it with you?
Yeah.
Okay, can you close that? That come up?
It's on the way. Yep.
So this is one big facade, but you see how the vertical grain is operating. You know, you have a bay that's got 4 windows in it above a all glass retail sort of thing. Then you've got an inset balcony. Then you've got something that projects out. And then there's like 2 different heights. Like there's a 3-story height, then there's like a 3.5 or a 4-story height.
Mm-hmm.
You see that happening here in this picture. You see how the verticality is expressed as a series of volumes that project out, volumes that step back, and then more volumes that step back that are color-coded and with balconies. So that kind of language is kind of operating here to create, in a way, kind of, I'm scrolling really quickly through these, through a neighborhood scale. Here, look at this. Here's your drawings, actually. I just feel like you should try to resist putting all one roof over this thing. The gable is a very powerful symbolic motif, and needs to be like, it's really important. Like, you can't use it everywhere. This is my personal statement. This is not what I should even be saying this, but like, the gable is a sacred thing. It relates back to the sacred sort of dwellings of, like, if you look at Abbé Loger's primitive hut, right? The twigs in the tree to create the ideal temple. If you look at the Roman temple, if you look at the Greek temple before it, if you look at churches and schools and banks, right? If you look at the basilica cross section, that's the gable. The gable has a very important symbolic linkage to history and to program. Now, having said that, you're probably saying, well, I see gables everywhere. I see them at the Starbucks. I see them at the bad public school renovations. I see them in motorhomes. I see them in everything. And that's because we've stopped like revering the gable as an important element, and we've debased it. So when architects use it, they have to be very careful of its application, because they risk extending the crappy way that we've always seen it being used in the last, 100 years. And one of the ways that we resist doing it badly is by not doing it at all, or only doing it in very special moments. So I guess that's the thing I would try to like be very careful about. Can you do gables? Absolutely. Is this the right place for a gable? It could well be, given the sort of importance of your project in the community, the way that you're structuring it. I feel like you of anybody should look at that. But I also feel like the way you've deployed the gable is kind of expedient, in the sense that it's tried to like use the gable as an all-encompassing umbrella for all of the program. And I think that's been done at the expense of the finer incremental grain of your community that I feel like needs to be not only preserved, but in your case restored, because so many of those homes have been like removed there. So in some ways I felt like that this sort of like housing project that I just showed you from David Baker was something that you could be inspired by and then depart from. So I don't know if I got through with you on that. That was not a very thoughtful and well scripted reason, but the gable as you've done it, particularly the gable at a second and third floor condition that sits above other things, creates another specific language that's very important to understand. It goes back to the Gamble House by Green and Green, at the turn of the century in Los Angeles, one of the most important large wingspan gable houses. And then there's the sort of the lodge, right? The ski lodge aesthetic that your work is starting to look a little bit like. So maybe then you ought to look at, like, if you're disagreeing with me, which is perfectly fine, then maybe you ought to look at several gables, not just one gable. And the people that did that pretty well are like Frank Lloyd Wright in the so-called prairie style, where it built up to a crescendo, usually at some fulcrum moment or important moment, like at the chimney, maybe offset from the entry. So what would it be like if it cascaded up and overlapped and made its way to something taller? So when you look at the Roby House, or you look at Wingspan by Wright, or if you look at any of the early, like the Martin House, a perfect example, Martin House, 1905 in Buffalo, New York. It's just a series of floating hip roofs. That might be worth looking at. But that stuff's really, really hard. That's why it's so important. That's why it's so regal, right? You're kind of playing with like the Old Testament right now. It has some very specific meanings, has fire, it has brimstone, right? It talks about really like this, no, not that. It's very black and white in some ways. And so I want you to realize how charged that is. Has anybody ever told you that before? Has anybody ever talked to you about the gable as that kind of sacred thing?
I've never heard that.
Now, I'm going to probably hear you say this back at the office, and they're going to say, oh, we do gables all the time. That's like the easiest way to get water off the roof. Yeah, but it has, right? And I know that, right? But it also has this very sacred origin that we as architects sometimes have lost sight of. And we use the gable because it's expedient, because it drains water evenly. Flat roofs collect water. Bad. slopey roofs, drain water. Good, no leaks, no callbacks, no lawsuits.
Yeah, also everybody, all the contractors are in Flint are deathly afraid of flat roofs.
Yeah, well, because they were all
Their flashing details
they
are
were
really
also debasings of like the stone bank buildings in your town and the stone schools in your town and all of that stuff. Tracy's asking me if I want a beer, and I'm saying yes. So I just had to text her. So I guess I'd think about that.
Okay, so you like the flat roof better.
I looked at this Onizuka thing, and I could see this having slopey roofs. I could have like shed roofs.
Hmm. Because I was thinking about, I have that kindergarten stuck in my head with the multiple, it turns all over the place.
Well, open your model back up. What if it was a series of gables, like that were no wider than like 2 rooms, and you actually somehow put a gable over each of the vertical things?
Like gables this way?
Show me the street again, please. Gables that way.
Like this?
Not one gable facing the street, but like 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, some odd number.
One in the
Or
center.
4 and 3,
I
something
guess
like that.
I was just scared to put gables like that next to each other because of
Frightening?
water.
You just drain it with a cricket,
Okay, so that's
Right.
not a big deal.
right?
Well, I've always been told, like, oh, that's bad, don't do that.
Okay, well, I'm not sure what rule system you're operating in. So let me look up another person that's done this.
Yeah, but I think that would be nice because it relates to the rooms.
Exactly. I'm typing in townhouses in Boston. And I'm going to images. Okay, and I'm going to screen share. Can you close yours?
Mhm.
Do you remember my friend Beth Whitaker, who we talked about a couple of times? We're working with her. So can you see these things?
Mhm.
So do you see that?
Yep.
Here it's a series of, so it's like a 3-story street wall with a shed roof behind it. See the slate? That's actually leaning back, right? And it's the dormers that create the gable,
Mhm.
right? Then you look at, and it's the same thing here, although this is the stuff that architects do today, but we should stop doing because it's cringeworthy, right? Because it's taken the sacred thing and debased it,
Mhm.
right? Here's the lodge vibe that you were just talking about. One single gable, right, with lots of things underneath it, raised up well over the ground floor. What I'm suggesting is something in spirit like this, where you mark the verticality of the architecture. This is my friend Beth Whitaker. You mark the verticality of it and emphasize it as individual elements that are fused together, or this, or even this,
Mhm.
right?
That's kind of what I had in my mind was where the
As we were talking tonight.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then you're saying, well, what do we do about that water? Is that what you're saying?
Well, yeah, I was.
So that's where you put the downspout.
Right.
Right.
Agreed.
There's a cricket there, right? You know what a cricket is, right? It's the horizontal roofing that we introduce between 2 slopes.
Yep.
That then, like, we put them behind chimneys that rise vertically from a slopey roof. and it lets the water divert away from the chimney rather than hitting the vertical wall of the chimney. It's a cricket, a saddle, right? Just like a saddle, and it splays the water the way a leather saddle keeps your legs away, open to the horse. So the cricket slopes the water, diverts the water to a downspout that then becomes some sort of decorative element, right? That helps re-emphasize the verticality. And then look here, so there's different materials. There's one sensibility about like normal windows in the white facade. Notice how the facade left to it actually has a smaller gable, right? Notice how the blue facade has a different sensibility about it by grouping large windows together to the left and creating a much more contemporary. So it's modern within the confines of a traditional vocabulary. I'm gonna go to this page because this is actually pretty interesting iteration. Oh, I probably have to. So here's a slightly bigger page.
Yep. And I guess that's kind of, I mean, at the beginning, that's kind of where my thought process was. And then I got skewed by me thinking about it, and yeah.
I don't know what I'm looking at now. I always get nervous when I look at these things because I'm not sure what's going to pop up. But I think this is sort of what there's the cricket.
Yeah, you can see it.
There's the downspout. See, there's the downspout. They're beautiful things. But the idea, I think, is really to try, and this is architecturally, in terms of the street wall, this is no different than what you just drew. But it's a series of individual things that aggregate, that add up and accumulate, right? They accumulate to be something, how can I put this? They are more than the sum of their parts because each thing is its own wonderful little composition. And then you can do little idiosyncratic things. Like, you know, what's really interesting, I mean, this is actually pretty sophisticated. Look at this. The big gable in red has a 2-story window in it that projects out from the skin with a covered entrance that's recessed and a double window. The one right next to it is not quite as wide, and it's not quite as tall because it's not quite as wide as the red one. It has the same 2-story window. It starts at the same elevation, but it actually is taller, right? And has the same porch, but only one window because it's narrower, right? And then its mate is much wider. It has a similar window, but then it has this bay that projects out that has kind of a roof at that archway, that doorway from the master bedroom, say. And then it uses narrow windows to fill in the edge, right? And then the blue one has the same narrow windows. Now the windows are over the entry, whereas over here, that was not the case. And then there's like a 3-story window grouping that has its own frame around it. This is actually, that's pretty sophisticated.
Yeah.
That's not expedient. That solution in this Fremont Blue by Mosaic page, I don't even know where we are, buzzhome.com. This is a pretty, this was a tedious composition. This took the architects some time to evaluate each window, the proportion, the mullions, and that sort of thing, and getting it to come out just this way, rather than sort of putting everything under one roof. So I would say to you, keep pushing this.
Yeah. I agree.
That took me a while.
Okay, now I know that it's okay to do that, and so I will work on that.
Okay. What else do you want to go over?
I think that might be all. I'll show you these in section. I don't want these bottom bedrooms to be super tall. And I was thinking about what I could do with this space, whether I would, make this wall lower and make it kind of.
You need to screen share,
Oh, sorry.
because I am right now.
Okay. So in this section,
Yeah.
looking through it, so this space right here above these bedrooms.
So how tall is the first floor?
The first floor up to here is 9 foot tall, and then
That's 8 foot. But then you have this void. You have the void space, right?
yep, and then I dropped these down to 8.5 feet for the bedrooms, just because they're more intimate spaces. I didn't want the really tall areas for
Yeah,
the.
that's a little problematic. What if could you create like a program for lofts where kids could take a ladder up to like a sleeping realm or a play realm?
Like inside the actual bedrooms, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
This is
To make those ground floor units even more special, because
yeah.
that's kind of those are kind of interesting spaces up there, and that relates back sectionally to what you were kind of talking about before.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Okay.
And it doesn't have to be the whole, like, it wouldn't be the whole ceiling. It
Yeah,
might be just
half
like
foot.
a 6 foot deep loft at one end.
Mm-hmm. All right. I think that's good. Yeah, and then I just, as you could see, I chopped these corners off for the,
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
and then I halfway covered them. So the patio. So I pushed the bedrooms out an extra 3 feet from the bottom to kind of give them that view of the exterior, and on the exterior you can tell that it's a different part. And then when I go back down to the ground floor, I still like this being punched in, but I didn't know how you felt about it, if you thought that there was maybe a better way, but I can't figure out anything else that I would rather do here, because it does separate these spaces in these external areas, and also kind of viewports out to,
I guess I don't mind it. I might suggest that where your cursor is, that landscape out there, if the landscape can have a similar or reciprocal geometry, then that space becomes more than just, like, right now it's just a rectangle that's, the void space that's outdoors. It's just a rectangle that kind of ends at the normal facade wall. What if what you were doing outside had a comparable or mirrored geometry out there? That might be a way to think about it.
Okay, I think that's a good idea. All right, that's all I got.
Okay, so what we've talked about tonight is not going to be easy for you to wrap your mind around. I think given the sections and the model that you've created, what I think we talked about tonight is going to wreak a little havoc on your life. So I'm sorry about that, but and you don't have to do anything I'm suggesting, but I do feel like it's worth looking at, and maybe rather than getting bogged down in like trying to rework the entire model and then freaking out because it's too difficult, or like wondering what the big deal was. It wasn't that difficult to do at all. It might be like advisable to like print it at a scale, like at 1/8 inch scale, right? And as an elevation, and try to do overlays in onion skin, and just to test it that way, and try to chase it as a series of elevations, front, back, side, side, and see if you can resolve it that way. And if it does seem to resolve, and I'm happy to look at that like over the weekend or sooner, then just let me know, and then we can do that. But it might be less cumbersome to do it that way.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to change it from what it is now. So I'll be trying different things. But if I show you it next week, I'm not going to change it.
Well, I know that. I know next week we're getting close to the end. But I really want this to be a good project.
Me too.
All right.
All right.
Did we talk about Hannah? Do you know her?
Hannah Matijevich.
Yeah. Have you talked to her lately?
Not really had a conversation, but kind of kept in touch as she's already started.
Yeah. Did I tell you that she was starting with us?
You told
Or
me
did
that
she?
you were interviewing her, so I just automatically assumed she was going to work for you.
Yeah. She began her new job with us today.
Oh, okay, good.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's exciting.
So I can say hi to you. Say hi to her for you then, right?
Yes, and also Nicole Drew.
Yeah. Nicole was also a former student of mine, and she started last week.
Yep, I saw a picture of her.
Yeah. So she
And I was like, oh, I didn't realize she was working there too.
yeah, she just started. She's quite giddy. She left Integrated Design
Yep.
in Troy and joined us. I kind of recruited her as well. And but I thought I remembered you saying somewhere along the way, maybe it was when we all had lunch, that you knew them through the sorority, maybe, or just through.
Yep, through my sorority.
Yeah. Okay, gotcha. Because I knew Hannah was involved. I guess I knew Nicole was involved too, but
Yeah,
Hannah-
Nicole was a little bit older, so I wasn't like an active member with her, but I do know her, and we've
yeah,
been together for a couple years.
cool. So yeah, they're both with us now.
Well, congratulations, you got a good
Well,
team.
I feel that way. I feel like I should be, right? So I'll say hi to both of them for you, okay?
Okay.
Have a good week.
Yep, you too.
See you soon.